Hello and very welcome to this webinar on Horizon Europe novelties. It's so nice to see so many of you here today. This short webinar, we will spend about 20-25 minutes together, is for experienced Horizon 2020 project managers. And what we will focus on are the novelties that concern the financial management, the project management of Horizon Europe projects. We will look into the five areas which we expect to be new or different under Horizon Europe compared to Horizon 2020. And as I mentioned, this webinar is for experienced Horizon 2020 project managers. And we will talk a lot about differences between Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. So if you're new to either Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe, you will probably find that this webinar is a little bit difficult to understand. And we will have something for newcomers as well at a later stage. The five areas that I would like to look into together with you today are new looks and new terminology, a new threshold for the certificate on the financial statement, new calculations for internally invoiced costs, new documentation possibility for personnel costs, and the new calculation methods of personnel costs. These are the five areas that are important to you, and we will look at them one by one. My name is Melanie Büscher. I have worked with the EU Research and Innovation Programme since 2017, when I joined the National Contact Point in Denmark, and I have there I mainly worked as a legal and finance national contact point. Then in 2017 I became self-employed as a consultant, and I work with small and medium-sized enterprises which have one, maybe two Horizon 2020 projects. And in last year I joined the research support team at IT University of Copenhagen, and I still work as a Horizon 2020 consultant and Horizon 2020 online trainer. And this portfolio will of course be expanded to Horizon Europe very soon. The goal of this webinar is to provide you with an overview on the changes that we expect for Horizon Europe, so that you know what to prepare for internally. And if we start with the first one, the grant agreement as we know it will look differently under Horizon Europe, because what the European Commission is doing is that they will have one so-called corporate model grant agreement for all sorts of EU program. And they will put a lot of the program-specific information into the annexes. So we will have one part which is the same for all the programs, and then in the annexes we will have the Horizon Europe specific articles, but also the budget as we know it, and other forms as we know them. This means that we will have to get used to a little bit of new terminology, but nothing that looks dangerous, to be so to say. The linked third parties, as we know them from Horizon 2020, they will be called affiliated entities. In the budget, and here you can see an overview of the budget, some of the categories. The one that we know as other direct costs, they will be called purchase costs. And the column which used to be called other goods and services will be called other goods, works and services. But content-wise, there will be no difference, I can understand, from what the European Commission has been sharing so far. With regards to the threshold for the certificate on financial statement, we will go from 325,000 euros to 430,000 euros, but the calculation will be a little bit different. In Horizon 2020, the amount was the reimbursement of actual costs and unit costs based on your usual accounting practices, whereas in Horizon Europe, we will look at the total sum of the requested EU contribution, meaning including indirect costs. So it will be much easier to see at what time you will have to send in a certificate on the financial statement. A little bit of, it's going a little bit of simplification with regards to a simple calculation at least. Now, what's going to get a little bit more complex with regards to Horizon 2020 is that for the internally invoiced costs, we're going from a unit cost that you calculate plus 25% overhead, as we have it in Horizon 2020, to a unit cost including your actual indirect costs. So you can no longer put 25% overhead on top of your unit costs, but you have to calculate them specifically for these costs. You can use an allocation key driver if you want to. The important thing then is that the allocation key cannot result in unit costs that are higher than what you use for other, for example, national projects. But basically it means for you under Horizon, as long as we have both Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe projects, you will have the same item, but with different costs that are eligible per unit. So you have to try to find a way in order to handle that. Now for the personnel costs, we're going from an hourly rate times the hours worked on the project in the specific project reporting period to a daily rate times days worked on the project. And in addition to that, the European Commission has already announced that that they will continue to accept reliable time records as documentation, but they are also opening for the possibility of a signed monthly declaration on the days spent on the project, meaning that timesheets are not necessarily a requirement anymore for Horizon Europe. That gives you a number of questions, because when you have both Horizon 2020 projects and Horizon Europe projects, you have to take a decision on whether you want to continue with time records under Horizon Europe, or whether you want to have time records for Horizon 2020, but a monthly declaration for Horizon Europe. And if you choose the monthly declaration, how do you ensure that you declare the correct number of days without time records? So these are questions that you will have to answer and find out with regards to your internal procedures. Now, in order to find the daily rate, we have to do a conversion from hours to days. And the European Commission is providing us with 3 options for Horizon Europe. Option A is that it says in your contract, in your work employment contract, how many hours per week you work. For example, if you have 37 hours per week, this gives you a day equivalent of 7.5 hours. You also have the possibility to continue using the usual standard annual productive hours, if you use those under Horizon 2020, for example, and if they are at least 90% of your workable hours, then you can use that number divided by 215. And why 215? I will get back to that just on my next slide. But if you divide that, then you get the day equivalent. For example, here in my example, I have 1634 hours as standard annual productive hours, and that gives me 7.6 hours per day. The third option is that you use 8 hours as a fixed number if you have neither A or B. So you have these three options in order to calculate your day equivalence. And here you can see the 215. What's happening under Horizon Europe is that we move, when calculating the eligible actual personnel cost, then we go from last closed financial year to calendar year. As you can see here in my example, if we have under a project period, for example, in my first example, the entire year is covered from January to December. In order to calculate the daily rate, we take the annual actual personnel costs and divide them by 215. And the number 215 is given by the European Commission. That is the number of days per year that we're going to use under Horizon Europe. And then you take the daily rate and multiply them with the days that you have worked on the project in that year. Now, if your project period ends, for example, in month N, for example, in the third month of a year, what you're doing is that in order to calculate the daily rate, you take the actual personnel costs of those months, for example 3 months, and then you divide them by 215 times n for the number of the month divided by 12. In this case, for example, if I have 1/3 of a year covered by this reporting period, I have to divide my personnel costs with that third of the year. This way of calculating also leads to a different or something that we have to be aware of. When you look at my example here, I have a reporting period 1 that starts on the 1st of September 2021 and goes until the 31st of March 2023. And the second reporting period then starts on the 1st of April 2023 and finishes 18 months later. In order to calculate the daily rate for 2021, even though the reporting period starts in September, we take the actual annual personnel costs of that person and divide them by 215. That gives us the daily rate for 2021 that we have to use and then multiply it by the number of days worked on the project. 2022 is covered entirely. We take the actual personnel costs for 2022, divide them by 215. And for 2023, we calculate the daily rate in a different way by taking the first 3 months, both with regards to the personnel costs and also the number of days. Now, when we go to the next project period, 2023, in order to calculate the daily rate for 2023 for the second project period, we take again the actual annual personnel costs of the entire year 2023 and divide that by 215 and so on. But what you can see here is that there might very well be a difference between the daily rate for 2023 that you use in the first project period and the daily rate that you use for 2023 in the second project period. For example, if you have a salary raise, or if in your country or in your institution you use a 13th month salary, or if around the summer break the way of paying your employees is slightly different. And that's just the way it is, that is just the way it works, but this is something for you to be aware of. Another novelty, and that's the last one that I would like to share with you, is that in those countries where you have under Horizon 2020 used the so-called additional remuneration, we go from additional remuneration to project-based remuneration. And this is relevant for all of those institutions where you have a basic salary, and then if the employee works on a project, they get another contract with another salary on top. For the next project, they get another contract or a bonus, and so on. Now, what the European Commission wants us to do is that, to start with, this way of working is absolutely eligible, as long as there is no difference between EU project and national project. So the raise or the bonus or the extra contract has to have the eligible part of it has to be of the same size, the same amount. If there is a difference, and of course you can choose to pay EU projects at a higher rate than national projects, or the other way around, then only the lower is eligible for EU funding. And if the national rate, so to speak, is unknown, or you don't have any clear internal rules that you can use for documentation, the EU is going to ask you to take the person's remuneration of last year, to remove the part that is linked to the EU project, and divide that result by 215. So again, still, of course, you're allowed to pay more, but not the entire sum will be eligible in case you cannot document it very clearly how you came to the EU bonus, so to speak. So that will lead us to the situation that we have the same person. If you have both Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe projects, you are very likely to be in a situation where you have the same person, the same year, but you have to use different calculation methods, and also very likely this will result in different rates. And these are the questions that I would like to end my presentation with. And they regard all of you that are going to manage mixed portfolios with Horizon 2020 projects, and of course there will be fewer and fewer of those over time, and more Horizon Europe projects. But the things that you have to decide and be aware of internally are the followings. One of them regards the internal invoices, that you have to handle unit costs without and with actual indirect costs, so different calculation methods and different prices for the same item, probably used for the same purpose, but since it's different projects and different framework programs, funding the costs or reimbursing the costs, you have to calculate it differently. Then you have to find out what you want to do internally with regards to the timesheets. Do you want to continue timesheets in Horizon Europe, yes or no? You have to be aware of the different calculation methods. So even though you have the same person, probably doing the same kind of work, but on different projects, one of them reimbursed by Horizon 2020 rules, the other by Horizon Europe rules, then the way the personnel costs are being calculated are different, and also the hours or days are going to be at a different rate for the personnel costs. And how you want to handle that, this is something that you have to decide upon, not today and not in the coming months, but at the latest as soon as your first projects are starting. And this was my presentation for now, and I'm very open for questions now. Thank you.